The most efficient prisons do not need bars. They only need a man who has practiced locking himself inside often enough that captivity begins to feel like temperament. People rarely collapse on the day the world rejects them. Collapse is usually a private apprenticeship. Joker is the proof written in grease paint, the dead rhythm of the clown agency, the white mask dragged across a hollow face, the cracked mirror receiving the same defeated ritual every morning. This is self-sabotage before the catastrophe has a public name. A routine built to avoid conflict quietly manufactures the exact fate it claims to prevent. The compensating grin, the over-careful gentleness, the exhausted art of being easy to dismiss. We like to think destruction arrives through betrayal, scandal, impact. More often, it arrives through repetition. What we rehearse in weakness, we eventually present as identity. What we repeat in humiliation begins speaking for us before we ever open our mouths. That is how self-sabotage stops looking like damage and starts looking like personality. So when Gotham finally answers Joker, it is not creating his ruin. It is merely entering a ritual he has already perfected. The 4 private rituals through which Joker was destroying himself long before the city ever touched him. Long before the riot makeup, before the subway blood, before the laughter finally stopped sounding accidental, Arthur Fleck was already living inside a hierarchy built to crush soft men quietly. Gotham belongs to people who can name reality first. Bosses, rich men, TV hosts, mothers with cleaner lies than their children have truths. Arthur starts at the bottom of that chain. He is not allowed to define what happened to him. He is only allowed to endure other people's versions of it. So he adapts the way weak men often do, not by resisting, by disappearing with discipline. He makes himself careful, pleasant, non-threatening. On the surface, it seems like survival. Beneath it, it is self-sabotage with good manners. A man sanding down his own edges so the world will cut him more softly. It never does. Ritual 1. He apologized for existing. The sign is stolen. The boys bait him into the alley. Then the kicks start landing. The scene matters because of what happens after. Arthur comes back wrecked and still speaks as if the real problem is administrative. Not the beating, not the humiliation, the inconvenience. He explains his pain like he is filing a complaint he already expects to lose. What looks like restraint is actually surrender rehearsed early. He makes his suffering smaller before anyone else has to. The real function of that softness is simple. If he accuses no one too hard, maybe they will not discard him completely. We can feel the disease in that instinct. Even injured, he is still managing the emotions of the room, still translating his own damage into something others can tolerate. This is where self-sabotage becomes elegant, when a man starts presenting his wound in a shape that protects the people who caused it. Ritual 2. He turned himself into a mask. Every morning begins with ritual: paint, wig, smile. Not transformation, concealment. Arthur does not put on the clown to become someone else. He puts it on to keep anyone from seeing what is already there. On the surface, it seems like performance. Beneath it, it is camouflage. He makes himself ridiculous so no one has to meet the grief underneath. That is why the bus scene cuts so deep. A child smiles at him. Arthur answers with clown energy because that is the one version of himself the world has trained him to offer first. Then the mother turns. Irritation, suspicion, that familiar little correction. He hands over the card like a man carrying official paperwork for why his presence feels wrong. The mask does not protect him. It edits him. Ritual 3. He waited to be chosen. Night after night, Murray Franklin flickers across the apartment like artificial warmth. Arthur watches him the way abandoned people watch lit windows. Then comes the fantasy. Murray sees him. Murray approves. Murray calls him son. This is not comfort. It is starvation wearing velvet. Arthur keeps handing powerful men the same job. Define me. First the boss, then Thomas Wayne, then Murray. What looks like admiration is actually dependency. If someone above him names him lovable, worthy, real, then maybe the rot inside his life can still be revised by authority. We can feel how childish the hunger is. Not childish in a mocking way, childish in the fatal way. The wound is so old it still believes recognition must come from above. He does not want success yet. He wants permission. That is why this form of self-sabotage is so corrosive. It delays contact with the truth. Every time he waits for a father figure to certify his existence, he postpones the moment he must discover whether anything solid exists without that blessing. He keeps chasing witnesses because building a self would mean standing alone in the dark long enough to hear what is actually inside him. So he goes home, back to the oldest lie, back to the room where his disappearance first learned to call itself love. Ritual 4. He helped the lie eat him. The apartment is not a home. It is a shrine to distortion. Arthur feeds his mother, bathes her, carries her fantasies like relics, keeps answering to Happy, that embalmed little nickname pressed onto him like a lid. Even before the file is opened, before Arkham hands him the paperwork of his own damage, the structure is already visible. She does not love him as a separate being. She loves the role he plays inside her delusion. The sweet son, the gentle witness, the extension. Arthur accepts it because roles are easier than selves. A script tells you where to stand. A script tells you what to call pain. A script spares you from the terror of asking what remains when the performance ends. We can feel how long he has survived that way, not by becoming, but by complying. And here the hidden mechanism finally gets its name. Self-erasure. That was the engine, the apology, the clown face, the father fantasies, the devotion to a lie that hollowed him out. Not 4 separate flaws, one continuous ritual. Arthur Fleck has been deleting himself in socially acceptable increments for years, until self-sabotage stops looking like damage and starts looking like personality. We see it now in every frame. The lowered eyes, the careful voice, the smile that arrives before feeling. The son still protecting the story that dismembered him, because without that story, there is no inherited language left for who he is. When he says he never knew if he really existed, it does not sound like revelation, it sounds like method. He has been practicing absence. So when Gotham finally touches him, it is not creating the void, it is entering one. That is the dark diagnosis. Final fracture, when the rituals fail. Joker is not born the night the city humiliates him. He is exposed the night all his private methods of disappearance fail at once. The apology no longer buys safety. The mask no longer buys softness. The fantasy no longer buys meaning. The lie at home no longer buys identity. And when those shelters collapse together, what remains is not a new man. It is the naked outline of the one who spent his whole life helping the blade find him. That is the real horror. Not that the world can break someone, that someone can cooperate with the break for so long that demolition starts to feel intimate, deserved, almost earned. The most efficient prisons do not need bars, only rituals, only rehearsals, only the slow genius of self-sabotage, until the cell feels so much like character that escape begins to look like death.